All right, everybody. We're going to get going because it is 4 after, and we're late. Okay, so while we get everybody sorted on the panel, want to just begin with a couple of housekeeping notes, introduction. Shirin, Deepa, Mark, come on up. They'll come up in a second. Yeah, oh, round of applause, yeah. Here we go, come on up. We're doing it, yeah. Before we do introductions and all that, I want to just briefly say a little bit about who I am and what this event is, and also just thank you all for coming. This is the first time we've ever done anything in San Francisco, and we heard you all like to talk about AI, and we thought this might be a fit, and it turns out it is, because it's a great showing, and we really appreciate it. We know there's a lot going on, so thanks for spending time with us. But by way of introduction, my name is JJ Colao. I founded what we currently call the New York Media Meetup about 10 years ago, and we should maybe change its name so that we can do events here and it makes sense. But in addition to that, I was a reporter. So again, going back 10 years ago, worked at Forbes, covered tech, startups, entrepreneurship, that whole world, venture capital, and then started a PR firm called Haymaker Group, and we work primarily with tech companies across all stages, some here in the Bay Area, which is why I'm out here, and many that are in New York and elsewhere around the world, including great ones like Gympass, which is represented tonight, and many others. Sorry. Oh, all good? So one quick housekeeping item. We are going to do a 45-minute panel. And then the last 15 minutes, we're gonna try and do Q&A. And the way that we're gonna do that is basically, you all will raise your hand. It's like it's a classroom. I will pick on you, and we'll try and just use loud voices and go through it that way, and hopefully get through as many as we can. And I think that's it, unless I missed anything. All right, so quick round of applause again for the panelists who have been kind enough to join us. And I'm going to do a quick round of just very brief, high-level professional intros while I sit down, and then we'll get into it. So first of all, I'm going to start farthest to my left here, Mark Sullivan, who's a senior writer at Fast Company, where he covers emerging tech, AI, and tech policy. He also writes AI Decoded, which is Fast Company's weekly AI newsletter, and he previously spent time at VentureBeat, PC World, CNET, many other great tech publications, and we're thrilled to have him here on the panel tonight. Also have Deepa Seetharaman, who is a tech reporter at the Wall Street Journal. She also covers AI and how it's changing business and society. Deepa, you started that beat about a year ago in March 2023. And prior to that, was also at the Journal working as the Meta Facebook beat reporter, worked on the Facebook files, an award-winning series of articles that I encourage you all to read, and also worked at Reuters covering e-commerce, Amazon, and all that good stuff. So thrilled to have Deepa here. And then Shirin Ghaffary, who's a tech reporter at Bloomberg, also covers AI and how it's, and writes their dedicated AI newsletter. So Q&AI, which I recommend everybody signs up for, in addition to Mark's as well. They're well worth an email, every week. Shirin previously worked as a senior correspondent at Vox, covered social media and big tech, and before that worked as a reporter at Recode, and also spent some time in New York at BuzzFeed, and also some time in product management in tech. Yeah. So I will try not to speak too much for the rest of the panel, but I do want to just contextualize things a little bit, because AI is a big topic, and there's a lot of ground we could feasibly cover, that we can't cover in 45 minutes or an hour. And so we're going to try and keep it relatively focused on AI's impact on media, which is the name of the event here, but actually keep that definition of media fairly broad. So we're going to talk about news media, and we're going to talk about entertainment media. And I want to start with news media, because you all are, likely very familiar with that industry and have thought somewhat deeply about AI's impact on your jobs and on your organizations. And that is a topic near and dear to my heart as well. So I'm going to start pretty broadly with this question, which is, what do you think AI's impact is going to be on traditional news media? And we can go in a sort of prosaic direction that's going to make writing easier, or we can go in like a transformative direction and say it's going to annihilate the industry or something like that. But that's up to you. And I'm going to go with whoever looks the most ready and interested. It looks like Shirin.
Yeah, I think at minimum, it's going to likely, I can already see it, right, aid reporters in the reporting process. I think for me personally, it's been useful in sometimes, researching a new area you know nothing about, and while you could do a Google search, I'll just give an example that I was talking about one time with a colleague when ChatGPT came out. Is he was writing something about voice assistants and wanted to look into the history of voice assistants like Alexa, and just kind of asked the chatbot, like, what are the can you give me sort of a lay of the land of like a market research report on like the history of voice assistants? And that's something that would probably take you a lot longer to do. Like on a traditional, like on a Google search, right? You'd have to be compiling a lot of that information yourself, whereas something like a chatbot could kind of concisely summarize it for you. So I think at minimum, I already see it, right? Like helping reporters in the research process. For me, myself, I definitely, I remember the first time I ever used it when I was back at Vox in the reporting process to help me brainstorm questions for XYZ executive. I already had my list of questions, but I was surprised and impressed that it came up with certain angles I had not thought about. And I do think, it can be useful in that way, just as a brainstorming tool. I think the bigger question around, will it really transform our industry? We don't know yet. I think the extent to which it will. I think these, AI companies certainly do see it as a transformative tool. They're actively forging partnerships with media companies who are positioning it as a transformative tool. But we've also seen some really colossal failures in these early integrations when people are relying on it too much. So I'll stop there and maybe let some of my fellow panelists chime in.
Yeah, it's been on my mind.
Sorry, folks. We'll trade here. We'll give you that one.
This is better. Cool. Totally forgot what I was saying now, but I think there's an issue of trust. Yeah, I was going to pick up on what you said about the Sports Illustrated thing. There was a big story about those. Somebody had the bright idea of generating stories, which is. I suppose for some types of stories, I suppose you could probably do that if you're, have some press releases and you want to write a story based on a press release. I suppose that's very possible. I think that there are motivations, probably, or business motivations for increasing your output. That's one button you can push. There are situations where that's warranted. But I do think that as this is normalized, and I think it will be normalized to some extent, I don't have a very rosy view of what's coming at us. But I think that when you look at the survey data, I think there's a lot of mistrust in the public about AI and the companies that are developing AI. And I'm just hoping that one result of this will be a more savvy news consumer that maybe appreciates what human beings can do. At least for the time being, we're going to be able to use our news judgment, which I don't think can be successfully encoded into an LLM yet. and we're going to be calling sources and weighing one source against another. And so I'm optimistic that, people are going to be more sensitive to that and put a premium on that. And I think there's going to be, hopefully, journalists that are doing good work are going to be more appreciated. So that's one side of it, I guess. But yeah, I kind of expect to see more of these news stories about. There was one about CNET, one about Sports Illustrated. I think these things are probably going to keep popping up in different forms.
I look at it as I split that question in two. So there's, to me, what do the owners of news media outlets, what are they going to do? And then how does it change the actual practice of journalism? I absolutely believe that people who own news properties are going to try to replace workers with generative AI. Whether or not that'll be successful, if you try to do it with the current technology, it won't be successful. Maybe in years later, it could be. But in terms of the practice of journalism, a lot of what I do is dealing with anonymous sources and sources that have documents that are not technically allowed to share them with me, but share them because they think it's important for that information to get out in the world. Like you mentioned the Facebook file story. I didn't get those documents. That was my colleague, Jeff. But Jeff didn't, it's not like Frances Hogan just downloaded all the documents and was like, what journalist should I send these to? It's a practice of trust. She believed in him and she gave him documents bit by bit over time. And that's not something, I think that's explicitly something we do not want AI to do, just like go hunting for documents that are, privileged and like extracting them out of other people's systems and then publishing them to the rest of the world. But it happens in news scenarios because of a conversation and a relationship between two individuals, not systems. And I don't think that, I know for a fact, is not going to be replaced by AI today. And I have a very hard time imagining that going forward, you're going to have, that dynamic is going to change. Like two people trust each other. One person has a mission. They want to share information with the world, but they don't want to get in trouble. They talk to a journalist. And I don't think a lot of people who think about journalism more broadly, they discount that part. It's not something that we talk about a lot. It's not just analysis that we reporters do. We're literally like extracting information and judging its quality based on our background, our knowledge. We are in the business of not rewriting press releases, but telling people about new stuff that is happening in the world. And that too is not something that LLMs can really do right now, but maybe ever. And I don't know if we want them. I don't know how much we want them to replicate some of the things I'm talking about.
That's very helpful. But in terms of, thank you. I'm getting some themes of faith in human reporting and some resilience in terms of traditional journalism, and I think that's fantastic. I'm going to raise the stakes a little bit because we had a discussion a couple months ago about the future of the media in general. AI, not really related. And you're probably familiar with some of the broad strokes of that, by which I mean the public's trust in news media is at an all-time low. I think the information space, where people get their information, who they trust in terms of facts and news, more fragmented than ever, and that is all without AI generating tons and tons of text and video and whatever it might be. So it feels like, from a consumer standpoint, and eventually, I'm sure from a business standpoint, all of that has potential to get a lot muddier. And Mark, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay, because I know you've written about some of these concerns. And what I am asking is, what are you concerned about in terms of just the acceleration of noise and the increasing difficulty of maybe sorting fact from fiction?
Yeah, I think this naturally kind of goes to the political realm just because of the timing of this. It's it's kind of an anxious situation with November coming up. But I think the sort of the doom scenario is, and I've heard people talk about this, is a different news story for every different person on Facebook media that might have a proclivity to be convinced of something. Totally customized. People talk about, not just generating the content, but using a system that gathers a bunch of data on every single news consumer and finds some way to automatically create content. Believe me, advertisers are thinking hard about this right now. And for everything that is used legitimately, somebody else is thinking about it in terms of how to use it illegitimately or to do harm. So I honestly can't sit here and tell you how close to that reality we are of, having, this super fine-tuned targeting of fake news content for political purposes. But I can tell you there's a lot of people talking about it and thinking about it. If that happens, it's just the timing of this is unfortunate because we're getting into my views a little bit here, but ever since 2016, a lot of people have been thinking about the destruction of truth, the complete devaluation of truth by political actors. And, there's still armies of people that are very passionate about destroying truth and destroying trust. And now we have this AI issue where, they've made tremendous progress almost by accident in the proficiency of these LLMs. And I'm just afraid that we're moving into sort of this kind of zero trust future where it just, the truth won't be distinguishable from the lies. And, it'll be so demanding on consumers to make that effort to try to distinguish that. And the goal of a lot of people, of course, is to just, have an information economy that is just bankrupt so that there's just nothing, to gain from it. So that's my personal fear. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going that direction, but, that's the worst case, I think.
I actually think I've been pleasantly surprised at the desire from the public to separate what is AI generated from what's not. I think we've seen like the Kate Middleton phenomenon playing out in the past few days, and I don't want to make light of it because I really have no idea what's going on with her, and I hope that she's okay. But I think that, it's funny when that story broke, I saw it and I was like, is this AI, is it not? And it was a weekend, I was like, do I drop everything right now to figure out if this was made in Midjourney or not? And sure enough, it turns out it doesn't seem like it was made with an AI generation tool or image generation tool. It seems like it was just regular old Photoshop. And I think that touches on two important, and I agree with everything you just said, but I think it touches on two important nuances here that are a little bit more complicated than just kind of a doom and gloom outlook, which is one, that there have always been ways to trick and fool people. I mean, I reported heavily on QAnon. I think a lot of people here who work for, in comms for tech have experienced users believing just human-generated content that is complete crap. So I don't think that that's a unique or new problem. I think the scale of it and the economics of it are changing because of AI. I think the second thing is that I almost wonder sometimes if you flood the zone with such high levels of BS, does it almost get to an inflection point where then people say, with this Kate Middleton thing, we actually kind of want to know, is the princess okay or not? Someone get to the bottom of it. And it was a very traditional outlet, right? It was, I forget if it was AP or Reuters, one of the two, who pulled the kill switch, so to speak, and said, let's kill this story. We think it's altered, this image. And you see media stepping up where it really should, and almost a validation of the role of traditional media in separating fact from fiction. As polarized and as demonized as media can become, I do think people still have that innate desire to know what's true and what's not.
Yeah, I think I was actually going to ask you though, like this future that you're talking about, how different is it from what you see on Facebook groups and Facebook generally today, right? I mean, I've had dummy accounts, right, that just follow straight QAnon and also, or straight very far right Trump people just to see what gets recommended to me. And I mean, it's not amazing, right? Like there's a lot of crap online. And so I wonder, like, are we actually already there? Not to bum you out, but maybe are we already there?
I was already bummed out. No, I really can't answer that question. I mean, there's definitely some of that segmentation and targeting going on, and some of it is sort of self-segmentation by the choices that people make. You remember when they were talking about psychographics, I forget the name of that company that was Cambridge Analytica,
yeah.
Right, exactly. I guess I see it as more like that. I don't know exactly how they would do this, but I think it would be something where you had agents working in the background doing more work to find more data points on more individual people than an organization of human beings could do. And that's worrisome. The content generation is the easy part. It's like if they develop that back-end system of developing such profiles of people and their proclivities or sensitivities, then you could just create content based on that. And I just this is not like real stuff I'm talking about. I'm just telling you what people are talking about and what some people would like to exist.
Yeah.
So just real quick in response to what you were saying, Shirin, what I took from that is almost this ongoing arms race between sort of the best inclinations of the internet and maybe the worst, dynamics of tech and AI. Meaning, you kind of get this old school, like crowdsourced, we're going to get to the truth, and we're a million people spread around the world, and we've just come together for this reason to figure it out and get to the bottom of it, versus all of the flooding of the zone that is happening. So it seems like maybe it's just a continuation of those. That kind of dichotomy, but getting even more, high volume.
Yeah, I think so. I also, you mentioned that trust in media is at a low. I don't know what percentage it is right now. It's probably not amazing, right?
30 something,
30s?
maybe lower.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the worst it's been in my career, but I don't remember a time when nobody likes us. Yeah. I mean,
There are dozens of us.
Yeah. But we're not like journalists, our job is to, I don't know, we're like the least fun person at the party. Like the person that's like always pointing out problems or challenging you or, calling you out on your bullshit. And it's not like, nobody loves being interviewed by a reporter when the reporter is really doing their job and like challenging them. It's not I've been interviewed by other reporters before. I don't know if you guys have had that experience. It's like horrible and it's not fun, and I'm very self-conscious of it, and I can't believe people talk to me, but they do. And I think, it's not, we're just not comfortable people to be around. And so sometimes I wonder, like, do those trust metrics, what are they talking about? Like, is it based off of a single story they read that felt was unfair? Is it based on what CNN did that day that makes them think it's unfair? Was it an interaction with a reporter? I want to know more about that, because I also feel, like you were mentioning, there's a lot of value, and of course I think there's a lot of value in what we produce, but I talk to people that are like, oh yeah, there was a video rolling around the internet about how OpenAI doesn't know if there's YouTube or Facebook videos in their Sora training data set. That was today. And I was like, yeah, that's a Wall Street Journal video. My colleague asked that question. That's mainstream media. So I don't know, there's like the thing where they need like news that is true and valid, but they don't like us as a concept.
No, I hear you. We can spend a lot of time on
Yeah.
this. And I think most people in this room are very sympathetic to that view.
Yeah.
But I'm going to switch gears entirely. Not entirely. But one last question in terms of news media, and then I want to get to entertainment, creativity, that sort of stuff. The licensing deals. So it seems like this is happening. There are deals with OpenAI and various publishers, some reported, some confirmed. The New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft. So, not everybody is on board. Where do we think this is going to shake out?
I mean, I can start just because very timely for me. So today I reported that OpenAI has made deals with two of the major European news publishers, Le Monde and Prisa, which owns El País, the biggest Spanish paper. And it's the same kind of deal that did with Axel Springer, where it's for essentially being able to use those articles to train OpenAI's models and then to show those articles in ChatGPT. And part of the deal is that they're going to expand how they show links to people and try to refer back to the articles, in full through these referral links. So I think it's just another sign that at the same time, OpenAI's issues with New York Times are not going anywhere, right? And that's still a very important case to watch, I think, for the precedent that it sets with copyright law. I think the New York Times can afford to take on this case in a way that probably other publications can't. And I will say that I have reported on talks that OpenAI is having with CNN, with Fox, with Time, and you're definitely hearing about more publications negotiating than actually suing. So I think there's a potential for AI and media to work together on this. I think the fear is that media companies get burned the way that they feel they were by Google and Facebook in years past, where some of those news partnerships deals did not end up being reliable and sustainable forms of revenue.
Are those publishers getting paid? Do you know?
I mean, the Axel
Cash.
Springer deal, my colleagues reported, was worth tens of
millions,
millions,
right?
So it's a significant
I
deal.
think there's also a question about what is the right amount to charge for that. There is a provision, I think we reported this, there's a provision in the AP's agreement with OpenAI where they can, if somebody else gets a better deal, they can match it. OpenAI will have to fork over more money. But no one really understands, how do you value these things as corpuses of text that will train these systems? How do you know if an output, any output, what influences that? What an LLM is pulling from? And then how do you give credit to that publisher and then also give them compensation? I think it's called the credit assignment problem, technically, but it's very real for publishers and there's just no technical way to do it yet.
Yeah, and also, I will say that so I was talking with Ben Smith, I did an interview with him for my newsletter on this, and it's interesting, it's it varies publication by publication, the strategy, right? And again, if you're someone as big as the New York Times, you may have the resources to just take on a challenge that other publications can't. And also, the New York Times has an immense archive, right? They have hundreds of years of articles. So I would imagine that's more valuable than a newer publication where you don't have as much IP to sort of negotiate on.
I guess I agree with all that, and I think it's going to be really interesting to hear how that case comes out. I think a couple of the last things that happened, if I tracked it right, is that OpenAI complained that the New York Times attorneys had hacked their system to
That was kind of funny.
Yeah, to create that identical. I mean, they were getting ChatGPT to output whole New York Times articles, Yeah. And, if you look at the lawsuit, though, they weren't hacking. What they were doing is they were just prompting the AI with like the first few sentences. And then the model would spit out the rest of the story. So that's not really hacking. But I think that there's going to have to be, at some point, if they do determine that, that example I just cited is definitely not fair use under the law. Fair use is, ingesting a bunch of information and then doing something new with it, but there are tests in the law for that. But I think at some point there's going to have to be a systematic way of paying for that data. And the question you ask about what the data is worth and how that's negotiated, that's very interesting. I don't know how they do that, but there's definitely a price to it. My only worry about that is OpenAI can afford to make those deals. Maybe Anthropic can. Maybe Cohere can't. And so they fall behind. And I'm worried about this question of, it seems like what's happening right now is like the number of people that have influence on how these models are built is getting smaller, and you have to have more money to influence those systems. And I'm just afraid that that might be one of the outcomes of this New York Times thing.
Okay, we are actually going to switch gears this time because, not because, but I'll set the scene. I was at South by Southwest this past weekend, which is why I'm so tired. And I was there for tech, but there's a lot of film there as well. People are premiering series and movies, and there's a whole tribe of people doing that stuff. That world is very scared. And I spoke to some people in it, and basically what they're seeing, and what I'm sure you've seen as well, is AI is getting pretty good at creating movies, and well, maybe not movies yet, but scenes, relatively realistic scenes, just in terms of text to prompt. So Sora, there are others. Voice actors, probably not much of a market for them going forward. And you're starting to see, I think, a lot of these vocations on the margins of video production and movie making that are pretty quickly getting outsourced to AI. Big Fortune 500 companies that have massive advertising budgets, like they're not hiring voice actors anymore, and there are a bunch of examples like that as well. So with that, I'm curious to get your sense of how you see that world evolving, and let's maybe stick for the moment with streaming and video and movies and that world rather than everything else, which we can get into in just a bit.
I think the cost savings there are huge. Like, journalists are relatively cheap compared to the salaries of actors and the budgets of movie sets, and CGI and animation, all of that. So, I think, of course, people in the industry are thinking about how they can use AI to cut costs, and that is, of course, going to scare workers, right? And those workers can even be very famous celebrities or directors, but they're all thinking about, I think everyone, once you get to a certain level of celebrity, you're probably thinking about how can I also capitalize on my own IP and brand and voice. But at the same time, like you're saying, there's people especially who are kind of on more of the margins of the film industry. Like, we have voice actors, animators, people who produce movie sets. I think they have good reason to kind of worry about what their jobs are going to look like in the next couple of years. I also think it can, the positive side of it, I would say, is that I think because movie production is so expensive, there are very few people who can make movies professionally. And I know this as a documentary filmmaker and someone who may have spent my career making movies, actually, if the economics of it were better. I think we have to be able to kind of entertain two concepts in our head at once, like with many parts of technology, which is that I think it can actually truly help in some ways a wider group of people be more creative, but it is absolutely, I think, going to change the entertainment industry, and I think we may see those changes even more quickly or more intensely than in like traditional news media would be my prediction.
There's a company, I'm blanking out on the name, but it's those people that did the famous Tom Cruise deep fake. That guy, he started a company, and the whole business is I can't remember it right now, but yeah, their business is to like kind of.
Synesthesia, is it? No, I forget who does those, but yeah.
It's close. That's a cool name, but their idea is like they're going to create a bank for this IP. You know, like I know, you know, there's going to be actors and actresses that have well-known faces that, you know, somebody is going to want to use that as a prompt and generate a whole movie out of that. And there's got to be a system for them to be paid for that. And so, yeah, there's already a business that's trying to help actors deal with that. So it seems like it's coming. I mean, there's definitely economic reasons for that. I don't know if anybody knows exactly how it's going to play out. I haven't seen a whole movie that's been, you know, where a character has been generated, but we're going to see it. And maybe there'll be something missing, you know? Maybe there'll be something that's not there that we get with a real person on film. I really don't know. I keep getting surprised about, you know, what AI can do. So I never want to say that it'll never do something, because I don't know, I've already been wrong about that. So
I will say the Sora, like we tested Sora and we asked it to make a video of like a parrot flying through the jungle, and the parrot steals like a fruit from the monkey. And like when you look at it, you're like, oh, this looks good. But then when you replay it, you're like, oh no, the parrot has a monkey tail at the end, and the fruit's like morphing into the monkey's hand, and it's definitely not ready for prime time. And I mean, by their own admission, they're branding it as like a research tool, and I think, you know, they're not giving it to the public partly because they're still figuring out some of the basics, like something called object impermanence, which I looked into, and is actually a really hard concept to teach an AI that we naturally get in physics. This idea that an object should stay in its place, essentially. So yeah, I don't think like, you know, overnight we're gonna see this totally replace movie production, but I think in bits and pieces it will. I think already with like static picture editing, or, you know, if you're in advertising and you want like to just spit out a bunch of like whiteboard ideas, it may not be your final product, but if you're like, I want my, you know, I want like 10 different concepts, right, of what this ad could look like in this color, this thing. It's very useful. I've been hearing that anecdotally. I will also say there are, you know, this is a big part of the union kind of negotiations that are going on right now in Hollywood and beyond. So I think we should also look to labor for some insight into how workers are thinking about this.
I think a lot of this is also going to depend on distribution mechanisms, like how do these movies made through AI get out into the world? And then whatever goes viral or becomes popular, there'll be just more and more of that. Like one thing with social media, it is the primary distribution system for a lot of people to get news or updates on their family or whatever, right? And so that's where they learn information. And a lot of the stuff that floats to the top of these news feeds are the things that got the most engagement from the public or their friends. And so you wind up just seeing stuff. There's like you talk about income inequality, there's like fame inequality too, like on the internet, and I think, on social media. So I wonder how those distribution mechanisms, I wonder all these questions that everyone is posing here, but another one I think about is how will the world see these movies, and then what will the market of social media decide?
Well, let's talk about that, because that's actually kind of where I wanted to take this, which is the flip side. We're consumers. We all watch, you know, Netflix and streaming and TikTok or whatever we do. What does it look like from our perspective if we kind of take this to its logical conclusion? Do we have our own custom AI entertainment bots, agents, that feed us the stuff we like you were talking about in terms of Facebook? Is it actually what you were saying in terms of we're really only paying attention to the Taylor Swift moments and everything else is kind of noise or gets 1,000 views? I'm curious if you all have any thoughts on how that evolves more broadly.
Well, I don't see why it couldn't evolve to something where the viewer of a movie is actively making choices about where they want the plot to go next. I mean, doesn't it suggest something like that? I wouldn't want to do that because it's too much work.
That's what I was going to say. I'm not convinced that everyone wants hyper-personalized entertainment. I already kind of have dissatisfaction with the way that some social media can be so targeted and specific that I will see a certain video and I have no idea if I can reference that with my friend. Maybe she saw that video, maybe she didn't. And I do think there is value in shared cultural experiences. And again, I don't think that desire is going to go away, even if the technology is providing us with an alternative. I do think that yes, there are certain use cases. For example, I'm already seeing a lot about really personalized children's storytelling. And when you're a child and you have lots of time and a very active imagination in a way that adults tend to lose that sense of playfulness, right? Of course, you want to be like, Mom, now I want to see the, dragon doing this. Do I want to direct a story at night when I'm exhausted like that? No, I want to turn on reality TV and watch Real Housewives and gossip with my friends about it the next day. So I'm not convinced that everyone's going to want to live in their little AI personalized storytelling bubble. But is that what these tools can be used for? Absolutely.
I agree. Yeah. I think there's going to be a test of how much. We don't have a lot of I don't know, mass media events, right? It was Barbieheimer, the Super Bowl. I'm sure there are other examples, but there's fewer and fewer of those. I just wonder if people get fed up and then try to embrace it more, or what. I don't know, but I think you'll get to a point where your average consumer is this is too personalized. I just need something. Give me something I don't have to think about, or just give me something I can actually share with a friend.
So we're going to do one last question, and then I'm going to open it up for the audience. I feel like I've maybe been a little negative. I would love to hear about what you all are excited about in terms of AI. And if we can keep it related to media, entertainment, I would love to do that.
Data analysis. I think a lot of times, you get, it's really nitty gritty stuff, right? We get a lot of public documents and we're okay, sometimes you turn every page, and sometimes it would be nice to just have a system that kind of looks through it and is hey, you should look at these places. Or today I was editing, I have a newsletter, not a newsletter, but I have a mailing list where if I need sources, I send a note, and 50 of these emails bounced, and I needed to strip them from my list, one by one. If anyone knows of a system that does that for me, I would love to hear it. These kinds of things that make my life easier so that I can focus on actually my job and my life. I think that, yes, I would love that.
Yeah, I think the research part is kind of cool. I mean, I think there's going to be, maybe for journalists, I think there might be stories where that weren't possible before. Maybe if I can say, go read these 1,000 research papers and give me the commonalities, or find stories in them, find trends, among this huge number of research papers that would take me 6 months to read. It's possible there could be things like that, probable. I kind of buy what you said about filmmaking. If there's a democratization effect, that certainly yielded a lot of wonderful things in other areas, like music, when people started recording their stuff in their bedroom, I think that side of it is good, but the thought that you have to hold two things in your mind about, the positive effect and the negative effect, because it seems like both are always there. I think that's super important, and I think that's one thing that I get a little bit frustrated about when I talk to people in Silicon Valley is how much one of those things is often suppressed, and that's the job of us grouchy journalists to remind them of that, I suppose. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to be weary about, but some cool things too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one personal example is like, I would love to, and my mom has a big interest in making a story out of her kind of immigrant experience coming from Iran to the US in the early 70s and, living through a revolution in her home country. And I would love to help her with that, but I don't have time at the end of the day, even though I'm a journalist and it's my job to be able to handle that kind of storytelling. I just don't have the time to really do that story justice in the way that I think it deserves. So I've been looking into, okay, how can we just have her sort of talk and use the tools that I use, right, to transcribe and then summarize some of her stories. But if we could take it to the next step and actually start to come up with storyboarding for a documentary with what shots would look like, what B-roll is out there that's we could use that's publicly okay to license under copyright. That would be amazing if I could get a rough cut. I mean, that's something that I could easily see using in my own life to hopefully, come up with more sort of creative work than I possibly can as one human being right now who still has to do my job 9 to 5 or more. So yeah, I do try to keep that optimism for an expansion of creativity, but I definitely shared the same worries and concerns as everyone else.
All right, we are going to take it to audience questions. So the way that we're going to do this is if you have a question, raise your hand. I will do my best to call on as many people as I can. And please just do me a favor and try and keep it short. We want to get to as many as we can, and we want to keep it to just questions and not monologues and that sort of thing. So who's got a question? Yes, sir. Just in case people couldn't hear. Gentlemen, looking to understand what research tools the folks on the panel are using today and what they might like to use going forward that doesn't exist.
You're saying besides generative AI tools, just in general, what do I do to research? I mean, Google, since it came out, I'm from Silicon Valley. I've been an early adopter and definitely use it every day. I mean, a lot of times though, like Deepa was saying, the best research comes from actually calling sources, talking to people, building trust. I think, public information is often cheap and surface level. And if you really, especially with current events, if you're researching something historical or academic, sure, there's gonna be quality stuff out there. But if you want, inside information about breaking news or sensitive topics, you have to go and do the hard work and meet people and build trust and get people to confide in you, essentially. So that's outside of just basic Googling. The bulk of what I spend my time researching is really just sourcing.
Yeah, the same for me. I actually don't use ChatGPT at all for research because it's hallucinated for me too many times over the last year, and in other times, I was trying to ask it, who coined the term, artificial general intelligence, and I just get either very bland answers or very wrong answers, and so for me that it winds up being okay. I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to Google because it say that I can't. Once you're double checking the results that often, it's just not worth it.
Perplexity.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Also
I've heard a lot of good
Perplexity,
things
yeah.
about Perplexity.
Yeah.
I think I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Perplexity.
I use that too. That one's helpful.
It's kind of I don't know if you've used it, but it's it does call on several different LLMs, but it's kind of combines that with, there's a web crawler in there as well, and they have ways of, when it's developing a prompt to give to the LLM, it can go out and grab information from the web to sort of inform the prompt, and then that goes into the LLM, and then you get a better answer, and then the user asks a follow-up question, and then that is added to this information that's given to the LLM. So, and the thing about them is that they kind of claim to come from a research background, so there's a lot of citations and links out to original sources. I don't think we're at a place anywhere where you can kind of take a narrative answer at face value and not go check the sources. But this, at least it's mostly right, and then you can always rely on the citations to go get it. So I'd encourage you to try that tool.
How that's impacting media, like the way I feel like. Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of people on Twitter who think they can be journalists, and it's fine. I think the way that particular story moved, it was really fast, but the idea of like a lot of people talking about, like especially sources talking about the news in real time on Twitter, we've seen that before in like political news cycles, and that's always an interesting dynamic, because the minute, especially employees, see something on Twitter and it's trending, it becomes part of the truth, right? And that is a really interesting problem and an interesting thing. And then in terms of AI, I don't know, once you start to see fake news, fake images and stuff, if they gain traction, it becomes a source of truth for a lot of people. And a lot of AI engineers and a lot of people in the AI community love Twitter. And I think that is super interesting.
Yeah, I think tech stories over-index on Twitter because, tech industry people are on Twitter more than other industries, I would say, on average. I will say with the OpenAI story, I think there's this perception that it played out on Twitter, a lot of those tweets or X posts, as I should call them, were actually linking to Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal or the information. That information didn't come from the ether. It came from the hard work of reporters who made the calls and, I was one of them, worked very hard to get inside information that was not public. I don't know that Twitter necessarily was the defining platform or reason that people got information out of that story. I actually think that personally, it's been harder for me to definitely verify what is, when I think of, what's a good research tool, maybe there's a reason Twitter didn't immediately come to my head, and it may have been higher up earlier, but that's just in my own research.
Sorry, over-indexing what story? Opinion story.
Are you talking about opinions that creep into what should be straight news stories as well? Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have data on that? You can send it, they have signals.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it depends on the distribution mechanism, right? It's like, it kind of, if more people are just coming to Bloomberg's site or app or our site or app, everybody's like homepage, which isn't really happening, you'll get that, but that creates a different incentive versus, you spot all your news on social media or, I don't know, some other, it's going to depend on the distribution mechanism, I think.
All right, leave it there.
Hi.
Go to this side.
Yep.
Oh, you got a mic.
Thank you. Do you believe that your work specifically and that of your peers make a more positive impact or a negative impact in the world? Do you truly make the world happier, better place? Or is the negative rap that we hear about social media and media, is that true? Is there some honesty to it? Especially with AI in play now.
What would a positive story look like? What would positive impact look like versus negative impact?
That makes the, bring the positive impact in people,
Like, positive impact is somebody reading the story and they feel delighted, or they're reading the story and they feel informed, or they're reading the story and feel like...
No, not entertaining. That will be entertainment.
Yeah.
Positivity will be, true journalism that brings out something that makes a positive difference in society, that uplifts a community, that,
Okay, let's leave it
I
there.
think
So, I think the question is, do you think good work that makes a good...
I think I would quit. I'm not in journalism for the money. Like, I don't think anyone should be. So,
Should not be,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely not like the career you chase for the greed, or even for the fame, because compared to, probably being an influencer or something, you could do a lot of other vocations to become famous more quickly. So really most journalists are in it, in my experience, because they feel they're making a net positive impact on the world. Now, I know some people don't think journalists today are making a positive impact on the world, and I'm not going to try to disavow them of that opinion. But personally, yeah, of course, I think positive, and I think sometimes, like I think Deepa was clarifying, doesn't mean that every article I write is going to necessarily uplift a community or make people feel better. I don't think that's actually my job. I think if you view a journalist mission as trying to inform the public and trying to shed light on topics or stories that would otherwise probably be private, I think then, yes, I think that I absolutely can do that at Bloomberg, and I'm very thankful to have a job where I can do that every day.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, the wording of your question kind of threw me a little bit, because I certainly don't think about it in those terms, but I do feel, honestly, a big responsibility, especially with AI, because it really is like a phenomenon that's happening in a few centers in the world. We're sitting in the middle of one right now, and it's being done by a pretty finite number of PhDs that are driving this whole thing, right? So it's like somebody has, it's incumbent upon us to do our best to try to let people know what's going on with these little tight circles, especially with something like this, which could be really dangerous. And I'm not getting into the doomer stuff. I don't know enough about that. But more middle-term things like, it's fairly clear to me that there's going to have an effect on jobs, probably sooner than we think. So, yeah, I don't know if it's going to make you happy what I report. I don't care, because I think it's important that it gets reported.
So since we got a round of applause for that one, I think we have to leave it there. It's also a couple minutes over, and I know we started late, but please, another big round of applause for the panel. And thank you again, everybody, for coming, and thanks to the folks at Trellis and other folks at Haymaker for organizing. There is still probably some lukewarm pizza and maybe some drinks and all that stuff, and we still have the space for a little bit, so we will be around to hang out. But thank you again. We really appreciate it.